This week I had my first attempt at photographing a mountain biking thing. It was just, I was concentrating on one rider. As I say, first time I've done mountain biking type photography, so I thought it might be a challenge. It turned out to be a bit more of a challenge than I expected, I think, in some respects. First challenge was the weather. We went to Rogate, which is it's kind of like a downhill mountain bike park. So there's about 15 trails, I think. I had a look online at the Rogate Bike Park website, and there's about 15 trails of varying degrees of difficulty. And it's down through kind of a wooded area on the side of a hill at Rogate. Now the weather on the day we planned to go was it turned out to be overcast, quite heavy overcast, drizzly, cool, breezy. So that was a bit of a challenge, to be honest, because the light under the tree canopy in the woods was very poor indeed. So usually, that diffuse lighting can be really quite, can be quite good for that type of photography, I think. But on this occasion, it was just a bit too. I mean, we managed, but it was a bit too dark, really. I thought certainly I was struggling for enough light. So the kit I took was the E-M1, the Olympus E-M1 Mark II, and I took just two lenses. I took the 12 to 40 2.8 Pro and the 40 to 150 2.8 Pro. I did take the times 1.4 teleconverter as well and didn't use it. Didn't really need it, to be honest. I think those two lenses had pretty much everything covered. I did take the battery grip as well because I didn't know how long the batteries were going to last. I did go through one battery in its entirety in about the 3 hours we were there. So what settings did I have on the camera? I pretty much used the same settings that I'm using for the birds in flight attempts and motorcycle racing. And that is continuous autofocus, no tracking. The focus points, focus targets, I varied a little bit between a fairly biggish box, but not the biggest, and a smaller box, but not the smallest. So I had a few focus points. I kept them in the centre, and that seemed okay. Although, the camera it did struggle a little bit on trying to pick up the rider. The two main challenges were the weather conditions and the poor lighting, and the other main challenge was being able for the focus to pick up fast enough as a rider comes into sight, because of the nature of some of the tracks, you're left unsighted until the very last moment. Some of them you're not. Some of them you get a good view as kind of, as the rider sweeps from side to side down the hillside. But some of them you're just you're unsighted until the last second. So that makes it quite tricky. That's a bit of a challenge. So yeah, that was the focus areas, and that worked okay. I used the camera in shutter priority and continuous low speed shooting, so that it had supposedly has time to refocus between shots. Auto ISO, and I did see it up at around about ISO 5000 and 6400 on occasions. Shutter speeds I was using between 2/50th of a second and sometimes 3/20th of a second. And I used back button focus so that I could track the focus kind of manually in continuous autofocus and then just hit the shutter button as I needed it. And the sensitivity of the focus is set to fast, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing in that it picks your subject up real quick, but it's a bad thing in that if there are trees and things in the way as they pass, then it'll pick those up as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You just need to kind of try these things out with that focus sensitivity to see what's best on in a particular situation. But I think got some decent results considering it was my first time doing this, and the weather conditions weren't that great. I think another thing to bear in mind when you're doing something like this is, particularly if you're working with one rider, is rider fatigue. Because after kind of 3 or 4 runs down some of these tracks, the whole process certainly began to slow down a bit, because it's quite a long push for somebody to push a downhill mountain bike back up to the top and come down again. So even though the weather was cool, I think it was 17 degrees, the rider was good and hot after a couple of runs, because obviously they're concentrating hard on the way down, and then they're pushing all the way back up a very steep hill. So that was quite interesting. Obviously, I did a lot of standing around waiting, but they're pretty much on it the whole time in one way or another. So what would I do differently next time? Certainly try to plan an event or an outing when the weather's going to be better. Could do with a higher light level. You'd think for right at the end of June we should be good for the light, but there you go. I'd also like to try some reduced shutter speeds to give more background blur. I think 2/50th is it's still a bit fast, so we'll try and bring that down, experiment with that a bit more next time, and also try to get in closer for some kind of wider angle shots, just to make it, give it a bit more variety in the shots. But I think some of these came out okay, but try and do better next time.